Okay, good afternoon. The May the 11th, 2026 meeting of Faculty Senate will come to order. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from the April the 6th meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is my report. Over the last 4 or 5 weeks, the Senate leadership team has responded to interests from the members of this body, in fact, more broadly in a wide variety of matters. That's going to be leading to 2 presentations today, one from Foz and Candy, one from Vice President Furby, one on the effects of the One Big Beautiful Bill, one on the effects of reorganization for a variety of centers tied to student affairs and student life. Also want to alert you to the fact that I know some of y'all have been interested in the accessibility policy that dropped and was posted at the end of last week. So we will at some point have a conversation with that office about it. I'm not entirely clear what the best time for that is going to be, given that we turned in grades today and all. But we will work on getting the appropriate people in front of you tied to that issue. Also tied to the ongoing interest in the ombuds position. We're going to probably try and kind of take that to the Faculty Welfare Committee to have a broader conversation about what it is precisely that the faculty are looking for in that space, because the more we talk to different people around the campus, what they want in that space kind of varies in terms of a traditional ombuds versus a faculty advocate. Should it be a professional? Should it be a faculty member? There's not a lot of agreement on these issues. So I realize many of y'all will not want to hear, we're going to kick it to a committee. But we do want to have as many kind of voices as part of that conversation as possible before making that investment. And beyond that, we are engaging in a variety of issues tied to our own structure as a Senate, especially tied to the committees. And so we are looking for ways to kind of better align the committees to serve you, but also to do so in a way that will be as efficient and the least time-consuming way as possible. So we're trying to kind of, hopefully as early as this week, the committee on committees will start kind of having conversations about possible reorganization to various committees all across the Senate. We'll see how it plays out. Kind of the initial goal might be to kind of try to cut the number of committees in half and kind of make sure that when you're putting your hours of work into this committee work, that kind of you're getting your money's worth out of that investment in time, and that we have a broader, or as broad as probably as efficient and helpful set of people involved in the conversations on a wide variety of issues. So you'll hear more about that in the near future. 2 other quick things was to mention. Hey, political science guy talking to the crowd. Remember, tomorrow is election day. And so yes, tomorrow is, if you're interested in taking part in the primaries for the parties, you can do that. But also keep in mind, political science guy talking to you, there are nonpartisan elections, including very important ones for the judicial positions in the state. So I would encourage you to go out and vote tomorrow tied to that, whether or not you're terribly interested in what's going on in the party primaries. And last is probably, for some of you, not the world's best news, but we are going to have a meeting on June the 8th. That, of course, we'll be quite understanding if you would wish to attend via Zoom. But there is going to be a lot of change going on this summer. And so I wanted to have a more pleasant situation for our new provost to introduce herself to you and for you to have a chance to talk with her. And so much like today, on June the 8th, we will have coffee, we will have treats, we'll have cookies, and those kinds of things. So we'll have both her and the new dean of libraries and possibly the new dean of Eberly, depending upon his move-in date, which is not entirely set yet. All here is kind of trying to be more of a community gathering kind of thing and kind of a direct faculty senators to oh, yikes, sorry about that. Leadership kind of conversations that are not quite so much front back, but give you all some kind of one-on-one time to the extent that's possible. And obviously, if there's any kind of important sudden policy changes or whatnot in the next 4 weeks, we can address those as well. But the big idea here is to kind of try and create a positive environment for bringing in that new leadership team. And with that, I think that's the end of my report for today. Do you have any questions for me on any of those matters or any other matters? Okay, then moving on, we'll move on to the consent agenda. By this point, y'all are familiar with this. It's used to handle multiple items all at one time. Today on the consent agenda are annexes 1, 2, and 3 from the curriculum committee. Does anyone wish to have anything removed from the consent agenda? All right, are there any objections to approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Okay, we'll move on to the committee reports. First up, the curriculum committee report from Kate Johnson.
Thank you very much. We just have the new courses, the revised courses, and 2 programs that were on the consent agenda. We have one more set of courses for the next meeting, but it's a very short list. So that's it.
Any questions for Kate? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the General Education Foundation Committee report from Cody Hood.
Thanks, Scott. So not much to report on our end, but I would like to give a heads up to anyone that's in the audience that may be listening. If you're an Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, you may hear me reach out to you over the next couple of days as we continue to work on contacting individuals related to making updates in Chem for their Jeff attributes. Our hope is that all of these efforts throughout the rest of the summer and leading into the fall do a good job of aiding the general education revision team, and they can take some of these improvements that we've been working on and making to the way that we've been updating, documenting, and assessing gen ed courses as they work through the future of the general education program here at the university. So that way, hopefully all this effort's not for no reason. And that's about the end of my report.
Okay, any questions for Cody? All right, thank you. Next up is the Teaching Assessment Committee report from Ashley Sowards.
Right, so fitting that we had Faculty Senate today because everybody should have received an email containing your spot results earlier today. The email for the faculty requesting any type of redaction will go out, if not tomorrow, definitely by Wednesday. You can look for that in your email. We're still kind of sifting through the suggestions of the new questions, and those will be reviewed and hopefully put into effect by either summer or fall.
Any questions for Ashley on this rather probably busy day tied to teaching issues? Think, Corey? Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, the Committee on Committees report from Leslie Cottrell.
Good afternoon, Leslie Cottrell, School of Medicine. So the Committee on Committees, Membership and Constituencies, COCMC, is currently, we're in the mix of populating our committee rosters for next year. Just thank you all. I know some of you have been cold called and said, would you please serve? Some have agreed to come back and serve again. We are very grateful to you. If you've never been on that committee, we divide and conquer. And so each member has at least 2 committees that they're in charge of. So we apologize in advance if 2 different people contacted you. That's probably because they're looking at the volunteer survey and they see you, they've ranked. So we communicate very well within our group and we get that sorted, but just to put that out there. Our hope is to have them finalized this week, or our plan is to have them finalized this week so that in our next meeting, we can present those to you, or at least the initial pieces. Do want to clarify a few things. If you are interested in a committee and haven't been contacted, please let us know, right? So that should have happened prior to now. Please let me know, Corey know, whomever, and we'll get that figured out. We will rarely turn anyone away, but we do want to go back through our records and clarify before we move forward, but it's not too late. We particularly need senators on a few remaining committees. We have a minimum roster that we look for, minimum kind of recipe, so many senators, so many non-senators, other faculty. And for a few of them, we're still needing those, like a couple more senators. So please let me know if you have room, and I can tell you more about the committees that still need it. Current members on committees this year do not automatically return. And same thing with if you've had a conversation with someone about leadership and someone hasn't contacted you at this point, We probably need to cinch that up a little bit. Sometimes we have conversations with different groups and that doesn't get to us. When it does, we try to figure that out. But if there's anything unusual, and again, no one from the committee has reached out to you, let us know. And then again, the volunteer survey is still open. We are still tapping into that. Corey's sending that to us regularly. And I think that's it. Other than I wanted to follow up to what Scott was saying about the committees. We have 13 committees. The committee has looked at those and their charges. And based on the sheer size, a little bit of overlap in charges as we've gone over time, and then a good amount of feedback from experiences over the academic year from people who have been on certain groups. And maybe they've said, we didn't have much to talk about, we didn't meet often. Whenever there's things like that are happening, we're considering combinations and certain proposals. Regardless, we will meet again this week to talk about that. And whatever we have to propose, we will present to you for consideration and discussion. Again, by the next meeting. So that's it.
Any questions for Leslie? I will also take the chair's prerogative to sort of add on to this. Is two things. One, I was never on this committee. I've been in the Senate since 2018. I've never been on it. It's much more complicated than y'all expect. So I greatly appreciate the work that Leslie and her committee do. It's just managing lots of things in the air at the same time. And also part of this interest is that we've heard from a lot of you, and we definitely, I'm sure we all personally understand it as well. The level of service that's being asked of people is a lot higher in the last few years. And that's part of this as well, that we don't want you to be wasting your time on a committee that meets, twice a year. If you're going to be agreeing to take part, and please, if you have the time, please try and, serve on one more committee. We want to make sure that you're getting, what you want out of that experience. So that's part of this as well. Also now the Board of Governors report, also from Leslie Cottrell.
All right. So we met April 16th and 17th, the last meeting. We are set, the next one would be in June. Student and staff representatives gave their presentations. The faculty one is scheduled for the June meeting. So we will be reaching out. Scott and I are presenting that. Many times we ask our colleagues to join us and we touch base on what topics would you like us to represent to this group. So that's coming. And remember that there's a public session. These are presented during public session. Join us, please, if you have a chance. During the staff and student presentations, they were fantastic. Just a little bit of highlights. They provided, particularly the students provided some next year initiatives, since we have the same president and vice president. That's always nice for continuous or sustainability. They're going to offer a $100,000 grant distribution for student projects. They mentioned a co-op store, which sounded fantastic, downtown. They're going to enhance the Hardesty Festival of Ideas with a podcast component, which was great. And then with each of these, there seem to be natural elements of faculty roles and opportunities to collaborate with them. Same thing with the staff. Since there are several faculty members who are, and staff members who are attending class, there's some roles that are, students who are considered employees and staff, faculty who are taking classes. There's, all of these groups share some commonality. Let's see. So I've been mentioning the April meeting many times. And in that meeting, we start to really dig into factors that we need to know that go into the finance model. Okay. So very, very important things that we've wondered in here: enrollment, tuition, this cap. We're going to hear about OB3. All of those are really important. It lines up to this June meeting where the budget is finalized. Okay, so a lot of it is education on all of the board members about what each of those levers are. Where are we as an institution for each of those before we make that decision going in. So there were a couple of positive pieces. Bond rating stays strong, and that's even with three submissions during that April meeting for additional money for modernization phases 3 and 4, which we desperately need, steam plant upgrades, which we definitely need, and then improvements that would enhance student housing. So even with those, our bond rating stays very strong, which is great. Not all institutions are experiencing that. So that's a good place to be. There were some legislative contributions. Jason's mentioned that to us in the past where we had some, not incentives, but financial income coming in to the university from the state. So that's a lever, right, that we talk about. The finance subcommittee and then the BOG at large also received the information about like OB3 and updates on enrollment. That will probably be in the next couple of weeks, the finance subcommittee, and then that leads into the bigger group discussion. Okay. You're going to hear from Foz and Candy what we heard for the OB3. So you're going to hear the exact same thing, which is really important and enlightening, and more discussion needs to take place with more data, and they've been awesome. Faculty Senate committees, there are next steps that we can come from that after the June. We have student recruitment and retention that goes straight into enrollment, as that group knows, that we could add to our end of year reports for next year and pass along to chairs and chair elects for next year. So for our continuity, we can share that information to the leadership for next year. And then lastly, consent agenda items, new program approvals. And again, this was already posted. There were some projects that were named by people who donated. And then there were some properties that were sold. Pretty straightforward. And again, those are posted.
Any questions for Leslie tied to the Board of Governors?
Yes, I can get that for you. Hold on, let me see.
I think it's the 19th.
Is it 19th? I should have had that. Love phones. Yep, 19th, 20th.
Any other questions for Leslie? Okay, thank you. I would very quickly interject that the student presentation was done by Rowan, Colin, and Olivia, Hank. I want to say that person was Shelby. If you teach any of them, good for you. Like the Board of Governors members are so impressed by our students. And of course, a lot of that turns on your work. So thank you for that. Next up, report from the faculty representative to state government, Jason Gross.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Your PSA already covered the only thing I was going to say. Tomorrow's election day. Consider voting. That's it. Thanks.
Consider voting. Any questions for Jason? I mean, there are going to be major public policy implications to the election results tomorrow. So if you are interested, I would very strongly encourage you to go vote. Okay, that concludes our committee reports. Next up will be the first of our guest reports on the financial aid effects of the one big beautiful bill that was passed by the Congress and signed by the president in July, I think it was, of last year. So we have visiting us today for that, Vice President Delosio and Executive Director Frazier to give a presentation on that. Thank you all for coming here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Hey, thanks, Scott. Thank you, Faculty Senate, for taking the time to meet today. Our apologies that we can't be there in person. We've got some other back-to-back meetings, but we did want to take the next 30 minutes to walk you through the OB3, BBB, Big Beautiful Bill. It's got like 6 or 7 names. Really important information. I am just kicking it off just to share, again, how grateful we are that you all are dialed into this and we're having these conversations as a university. I do want to underscore these changes to federal financial aid are not just impacting WVU, it's across the country. And I've brought in what I like to call the talent in our executive director, Candy Frazier, because she has been living, dreaming, sleeping this big, beautiful bill for several months. And she's going to share with you all kind of where things stand as of today. Also sharing that this isn't quite 100% baked. There are new pieces being added. We're learning new things all the time. But as a university, we're lucky to have Candy because she's been on top of it and she's been a resource and support for many in this room and across campus as we've started to plan and try to be prepared for it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Candy to walk us through OE3. Thanks, Candy.
Thank you. Vice President Delosio, I know you're going to help share the presentation and kind of aid me. So the One Big Beautiful Bill, yes, it was signed last July. However, there are significant financial aid changes that have to be implemented by July 1st of this year. For what we'll be talking about today, these changes, the final regulations just came out on May 1st. Those final regulations were from what was called the RISE negotiated rulemaking. And as Vice President Delosio just mentioned, no, these are not completely baked. But let's look at some of the significant changes right now. You want to advance the slide, please? So the first significant change is that the Parent Plus loan now will have an annual cap of $20,000 for each dependent student. So previously, parents could borrow up to the cost of attendance for a student, less any financial aid that that student was receiving. So for an example, if you have a student who has a cost of attendance of $50,000 and that student has other financial aid and scholarships of $10,000, the parent or the parents of that student could borrow up to $40,000. So it would completely cover that student's cost of attendance. Under the One Big Beautiful Bill, it is now limited to $20,000 for the student. So in that scenario, both students couldn't borrow $20,000, or both parents could not borrow $20,000. It is a total that the parents could borrow is now $20,000. There's also a new total aggregate limit for Parent Plus. Previously, there was no aggregate limit, but now it is a total of $65,000 for that student's undergraduate career. If we put that into perspective, if you have a first-time student coming in and their parents do borrow $20,000 for the first 3 years, they would have expended $60,000. So in theory, in that final year, that family may only have $5,000 available in the Parent Plus loan. The next significant change is the complete elimination of the Graduate Plus loan. So the federal government did not say, well, let's just put an annual cap. They indicated that they are going to completely eliminate the Graduate Plus. And the Graduate Plus is very similar to the Parent Plus, where graduate and professional students would cover the remaining balance of their tuition and fees, their full cost of attendance, less any other financial aid they were able to borrow in that Graduate Plus loan. Now, there are legacy provisions. I'm going to go over specifically what it means for a student to be granted legacy. It's not as simple as just saying they were here prior to July 1st, so they have legacy. There's a lot of other things that are baked into that, built into that legacy definition. There's also new annual and aggregate limits for graduate and professional students. And then there's also something called the schedule of reduction. So previously, when a student was enrolled and they had received a student loan, they would be able to get the full allowance of that student loan as long as they were enrolled for at least half time. Now there is a requirement that if a student enrolls for less than half time, or excuse me, less than full time, we are required to make an adjustment to that loan based on the number of hours that the student is enrolled. So let's take a look at some data. So the first thing that I did is I was like, well, I need to see what the impact of this is going to be. And what you see here on the slide is the number of first-time students who began in the fall of 25 or the spring of 26, whose parents borrowed over the $20,000 cap. So you can see from that population of just first-time students, almost 400 of them, their parents borrowed over the $20,000 cap, $5.5 million. So, and you can see there's a big difference between impact for non-resident students and for resident students. So the next slide actually demonstrates the impact for Graduate Plus. So again, I looked at who are those graduate students who started in the fall of 25 or the spring of 26. How many were there? Because now this program is not going to be available for any first-time students coming in. So it was almost 200 students across all of the colleges where we did have borrowing that had taken place. And that was to the tune of $4.7 million. And then I want to dive a little bit more into this legacy before I give you the impact of what we've determined as far as who has lost their legacy. So who qualifies for legacy? So a student had to have been enrolled in a program by June 30th, and they had to have had a direct loan dispersed prior to July 1st. They have to remain in the same program, and there are different rules for undergraduate and grad professional. They have to have been able to complete their degree in the lesser of 3 years or the remaining time to credential, and they have to stay continuously enrolled at the university. So any transfer students coming in, we know they're not going to have legacy. Anybody who withdraws from a semester or takes a semester off will in fact lose their legacy. I wanted to specifically talk about remaining in the same program because I did listen to negotiated rulemaking, and it was a lively conversation because we recognize, and so did the negotiators, that in the undergraduate population, we have students who change their major quite a bit. So for the undergraduate population, they're looking for those that remain in the same degree type. So if you're an associate student and you remain in an associate degree program or a bachelor to a bachelor, you will retain your legacy, even if you change your major. So I gave the example here for a student who started out in the BS in environmental soil and water sciences, and then the student changed their major to a BA in history. This student is remaining in a bachelor's program. It is the same degree type, so they have retained their legacy. For graduate professional, it's a completely different ballgame. They have to stay within the same major. So if you have programs where you maybe you do a couple years of PharmD and then you want to switch over to MBA, because you would be changing your major in that scenario, you would lose legacy. And once a student loses legacy, they are subject to the new regulations and they cannot regain legacy. So along with that, I want to specifically talk about what do I mean by the remaining time to credential. So for those of you who may not be aware, for all of the programs that we have here at the university, we defined what is the length, the traditional length to complete a program. So when you think about a bachelor's program, that's 4 years. When you think about an associate's degree, that's 2. Graduate professional, of course, those can vary. So when I was talking about remaining time to credential, the example here that I have is a bachelor's degree student who has completed their first year at the end of this year, and they're planning on returning in the fall of 2026. So for remaining time to credential, since they have only completed 1 year, they in fact have 3 years, so they will retain their legacy up through 28-29. Example 2 is for our student who has completed 4 years, but then they recognize that they do need to return for their 5th year in 26-27 to finish their program. Unfortunately, the student in example 2 will not be eligible for legacy status because their enrollment extends beyond the published program length. So here's the impact. This, really got to thank the registrar's office for assistance on helping us try to back into some data. But we have been able to identify at least 75 students across the university who did not apply for graduation that we anticipate that will be coming back. And those students borrowed in either the Parent Plus or the Grad Plus $1.9 million. Now, to give you the total potential impact, go ahead and switch the slide, please. Of the 3 scenarios that I gave, we had 672 students that are impacted for a total of $12 million. That's $12 million that students who came in this year are not going to have available to them next year. And this is only 1 year's worth of information. You'll also see the impact on residency. This should not surprise anyone that almost 3/4 of the population that is impacted, negatively impacted, is the non-resident population. And then 1/4% or roughly 1/4% is for residents. So we anticipate, go ahead and slide it back, please. We anticipate that students and parents, they're going to try and find a way to bridge the gap. Most of them are going to bridge that gap through private credit-based loans. A recent study that came out in March of this year, which was conducted by the Protect Borrowers and the Century Foundation, unfortunately, they are reporting that roughly 40% of individuals who apply for a private loan will be denied for various reasons. Those figures actually increase for our neediest population, which is our Pell Grant recipients. About 61% of those will be denied simply because they do not meet the minimum income requirements to be eligible. As I have been talking with stakeholders across the university and administration, I have continued to stress that the university may need to consider an increased investment in institutional aid to help us help these students who have been impacted. The next slide shows us what the new graduate and professional borrowing limits are. So for previously, a graduate or professional student was eligible for $20,500 in what was termed the unsubsidized student loan. There were some variations with that for some of the health programs, for the HEAL loan going away, but for the most part, everybody was eligible for $20,500. Congress had proposed, and it was passed through the bill, that certain professional programs actually be eligible for $50,000. So we looked at the information, and we do have 4 programs that will meet that definition, and that is the JD program, MD, DDS, and PharmD. The next bullet where I said current professional legacy students cannot opt out of legacy to receive the $50,000, because as we were thinking through this, we have first year, let's say, pharmacy students or law students who would greatly benefit if they were eligible and could take the $50,000. But if they are in fact a legacy student, they are still bound and under the rules of the $20,500. The aggregate limit for a professional student also has changed. It is now $200,000, and it does include any monies that would have been borrowed as a graduate student. And in my experience in working in Health Sciences Center for several years, we did have a lot of students who would get a graduate degree and then move into some of the professional programs. So we need to keep that in mind. The overall lifetime limit, that is now $257,500. When you think about this lifetime limit, think of that as a bank account, and it's got $257,500 in it. The students can then borrow against that, which is very similar to, the limits that we had previously, except with one caveat. Once you have borrowed, even if you have repaid it back, that does not regain eligibility. So if you have a graduate student and they've borrowed 100,000 and they start working for a couple of years, they decide, I'm just going to go ahead and pay this money off, but then they want to come back to professional school. That $100,000 will always stay as part of that 257,500. So they will not be able to get 257,500 in their professional degree. It will be limited by that $100,000 that they had already taken out. One of the recent changes, so this is new information for people who have seen my presentation previously, is the change in the distribution of student loans if summer is required. Now, previously, what we would do is we would just split that loan equally between the fall and the spring semesters. If summer is a required term within the published curriculum, the loan must be evenly distributed between fall, spring, and summer terms. Now, this does not mean that the suggested plan in the catalog says summer. This is defined programs where that course may only be offered in the summer, or let's say a defined program like medicine and dentistry, where we know that they have a published strict curriculum that all students within that cohort are following. Next slide. So the last thing I'm going to talk about in relation to the One Big Beautiful Bill is also the one where we don't have a lot of information, and that is called the Scheduled Order of Reduction for students attending less than full time. So there's a formula. I'm not going to go over it in detail. I do want to remind, before I get into my examples, what full-time enrollment is defined. So as an undergraduate student, the Department of Education defines full-time enrollment. It is 12 hours for each semester. So 12 hours fall, spring, and summer. For a graduate student, the university has flexibility in that. We get to define what is full-time enrollment. For WVU, that is defined as 9 hours for the fall and spring and 6 hours for summer. So let's look at some of these examples here. And again, because we are still waiting for a lot of guidance, and I know I mentioned at the top of my presentation that final rules, were published on the 1st of May. But unfortunately, there are so many unanswered questions that I'm going to give you a simple example, but we still are, seeking and learning as much as we possibly can to determine what the impact is. So the first example is a dependent undergraduate student who can borrow $5,500. And we're assuming they're not required to go in summer. So they're going to get an equal portion of that in the fall and in the spring. The student enrolls for 12 hours. And then before loan disbursement happens, the student drops to 6 hours. We as an institution previously would have just been able to pay that full amount onto the account. But unfortunately, right now, we are required to reduce that based on the formula. So that student, instead of getting $2,750, would get half of that at $1,375. Example 2 is that same student, enrolled for full-time, and then we paid money. So at the time that we paid based on full-time status, but then the student decides to drop hours after disbursement. So you see there's a difference for before disbursement and a difference for after disbursement. So they drop to 6 hours. At that point in time, we are not required to ask for money back from the student. There was flexibility. The government said that we can do that. As an institution, we feel like that's just going to be a further burden on the student. So we are not doing that. But as we move from the fall semester to the spring semester, we have to take that into consideration to determine what is the student's eligibility for that spring disbursement. So that student who in fact only completed 6 hours in the fall, and then they enroll in 12 hours in the spring, you would think 12 hours they're full time, they should be able to get the full allowance. But based on the calculation, because they're only enrolled for 18 out of 24 hours, they're only going to get $1,375 in the spring. The second example allows for a student to kind of catch up. So this student is the same student who finished with 6 hours in the fall. They then enroll for 18 hours, which gets them to the 24 requirement. So they're actually eligible for their full loan for the spring semester. So things that we have done as far as our planning, our mitigation, our communication, obviously we've worked on some analysis, which, I'm trying to get out to all the stakeholders. We've also developed resources for front-facing staff. We met with advisors. We asked for questions from them, and we're developing Q&As specifically for them. We've also launched a dedicated webpage for students and families. We're communicating with the impacted students and the stakeholder groups, and I want to clarify some things here. When I say communicating, I'm not just saying we're going to send just a general message out saying, hey, the one big beautiful bill, it may impact you. We're actually trying to back into the populations that are going to be impacted by the one big beautiful bill, letting them know what the situation is and what their options are. And then the final thing, which I really feel is extremely important, is that we've added some significant financial literacy on our website to support the informed private borrowing decisions, because we know that some students, they don't have credit, they have negative credit. How do they kind of navigate that to maybe improve their credit? Here's a few resources, but I believe that most of you received the presentation, so I'm not going to go over those. I think we only have a couple minutes for questions.
Does anyone have a really good first question? Megan.
Megan, like College of Creative Arts and Media. Can we go back to just slide 12? I want to ask just a clarifying question.
Sure.
Possible.
Hold on one second. Technical difficulty here. PowerPoint.
I mean, Candy, I can just ask it too. The question
Yeah.
was, you wrote fall, spring, and summer, but then referenced 24 credit hours. So the question is it 36 or is it 24 to be considered full-time for undergraduates?
Well, that's a very good question. If summer is required, then it will be 36. If summer is not required, then it is 24.
Okay. Generally for undergraduate programs, though, summer is not required. I don't actually.
Exactly.
Okay.
Since you asked the question, I'll let you know what I have been doing. I have been working with the provost office. They have been reviewing data and catalogs. They have also been reviewing whether or not a summer course is only offered in the summer. Because if it's offered at a different period of time, then summer, in my mind, in that case, is not required. There are very few programs that I believe are going to be negatively impacted by the required in summer definition. There are several in Health Sciences Center, which we are addressing specifically with that population. And then there are a few for the undergraduate and other graduate programs for both Morgantown and then the regional campuses. But we're still kind of vetting through that. And I know that the provost office, I'm working with Lou Simlak. I know that he is going to have some conversations with some of the folks within the colleges.
Okay. Can I ask a second question already? Okay. Has there been any discussion at the legislative level about upping the Promise Scholarship to help offset any in-state tuition costs that may be impacted by this? Or is that not on the docket yet? And or this might be a Jason question.
I can tell you that the promise remains unchanged except for the requirement to drop the science from the ACT for 27, because they just actually approved those stipulations for 27. Promise always has bills that are introduced in state legislature. It has stayed at the $5,500 range for at least more than a few years.
Okay, thank you.
Candy, I know you've got to go, but can you take one more?
I can.
Lisa Costello, School of Medicine. Friendly reminder, vote election days tomorrow. If this isn't making you be more motivated, you should. Candy, it's great to see you. When I was a medical student here, you helped me navigate financial aid, so still here. And I do stand with a question because of the impact disproportionately, I believe, that's going to be faced on our professional students in the School of Medicine as well as in health science with dentistry. As you broke it down, both medicine and dentistry are the only ones that are both over $1 million of impact. So perhaps this is to you, and then also a question for larger. When tuition increases are passed by the Board of Governors, they're a blank percentage. And when the base tuition is higher, when you raise tuition by 3%, that disproportionately impacts MD program, DDS program. So are there any discussions in regarding having a tiered approach when we're looking at the tuition for these different programs? Because a blank percentage increase is going to disproportionately impact some programs that are already being impacted by what's in HR 1.
I'll defer to Fabrizio on that.
Yeah, at this time, I'm not familiar with any of those conversations specifically as you described. I know we've talked about resident and non-resident tuition and 3% and 6%, but not from the lens that you just asked that question.
Thanks. And just my other follow-up question, what are we doing working with the foundation to try to have additional support? I can recall a student who was on my rotation in pediatrics, and I learned a year later was living out of his car because his financial aid check didn't come in time to be able to put down to be able to rent a place. And a classmate took this student in. So are we having discussions with financial a foundation and other ways that we can create means, particularly in the short term, as we see what implications may impact our students?
Candy, I can try to take a stab at that one and feel free to expand. So yeah, we have regular conversations with our partners in the foundation around leveraging the resources that donors have provided to help support students where they are, and helping them stay enrolled at the university and getting the supports they need. So those conversations are ongoing. They've identified resources in the past. We're also helping connect those donor dollars to students rather than have them potentially sit in an account and not being used. Candy, anything to add to that? Oh, or Mike, President Benson?
Yeah, Faz, if I could add, I'm actually speaking with the chair of the foundation tonight about several different topics. One of which is the spend rate that the foundation's established as it relates to scholarships. We really want to see that increased. But to Faz's point, there are some scholarship agreements that may not have a certain type of student from a county that's stipulated in the donor's wishes, and so we are going literally by agreement to see if we can loosen those, and to Faz's point, make sure they get spent, that they don't just sit there. And certainly they're generating interest income, but more importantly is giving the opportunity to students to have access to those funds so they can not be so dependent on other sources like federal loans or something else. So yes, we're working very hard with the foundation and have really good relations with them, but we'd like to see even more support for our #1 priority, which is scholarships.
Okay, Faz and Candy, I appreciate y'all being here. I know you got a super busy
We
Monday
do.
today. And
Thank
so
you,
it's
everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
helpful.
time.
And for Scott and Joe, anybody else who has questions in the room, we knew in advance that they only had 30 minutes today. We also knew that I'm sure several of you have questions. So please, whether it's Corey or myself, email those to us and we will compile them put them together and get them to that team so that we can distribute this. Because we're well aware of how concerning this is to a wide variety of the faculty / employees at WVU. So yeah, do reach out, because the intention was not to them not have questions, that they just had a certain day today. So just email us, we'll get it to them. Okay, next guest report is President Benson.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Scott, for the chance to be with you. And I appreciate your indulgence in letting me join via Zoom. I came to South Carolina to be with my family for Mother's Day, and my youngest played in the first round of the state championship in golf and was the lowest score for his team. So he's got round 2 tomorrow. But yes, I did early vote. I voted on Tuesday. And to echo what's been said, I certainly encourage all of you to go out and participate and invoke your right to the franchise. So speaking of last Tuesday, it's when we embarked on our last leg of our county tours. I've now been to 54, 55. This is maybe a little redundant, but we're counting Mon County as number 55. And the big celebration will be Friday night when we light the water tower on the Evansdale campus. Some of you probably have seen the work that's gone on. I've kept close tabs on it, but we're having a 12-year-old cancer patient who's going to be there with his family, and we'll push the button and the lights will come on. So that's 8 o'clock on Friday evening. Everyone's invited to participate. It's after our 3rd ceremony on Friday, and we purposely wanted to tie it to graduation as a way to celebrate our entire graduating class and all the families and friends that will be in town. I know Leslie mentioned the celebrations that we've had in terms of, I call it award season, and both Roe and Colin, our student body president and vice president respectively, were recipients of big time awards. Colin won the Udall Scholarship, and Roe is the university's 28th Truman Scholar. So really excited for both of them. Leslie also mentioned bond ratings. One kind of footnote I wanted to add was our bond rating was reaffirmed, but we were also given a stable outlook. And agencies can either be positive, stable, or negative. And we're the only one, I think, in the state that may have that public institution and higher education as a sector by the 3 agencies that have actually been given a negative outlook. So we're encouraged by that. I mentioned that the ceremonies this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I also want to thank Hope Gas for their support in helping us refurbish the Evansdale Water Tower. Also, I have a chance, as you may or may not know, I've never had this opportunity at my other institutions to award an honorary doctorate for my office, and I have kind of the singular honor of doing that. And this year I decided to recognize our very first member of the faculty that was elected to one of the national academies, and that is Dr. Sid Peng, who in 2007 became our first ever inductee into the National Academy of Engineering. The other 2 academies, of course, are medicine and sciences. He came here a long time ago, 40 years of service. He came to the university in 1974. He was the department chair for the Department of Mine Engineering since 1978 and until 2006. He is kind of getting advanced in years. I had a chance to meet him in California a few weeks ago. Delightful man, owes everything to his time at the university. And I really felt like this was an appropriate way to recognize not only him, but the accomplishments of our faculty and why that's so important to celebrate. So he was the recipient this year. Our other 3 award degree recipients will be Art Gabriel. He, along with his brother, is a co-founder of Gabriel Brothers. He graduated from the Chambers College, opened his first store in Morgantown, and has expanded to 115 stores nationwide. Continues to be very active with the Chambers College. Tom Jones is a name you may recognize. He's been or had been associated with the university for a long time, specifically with W Health System from 2002 until his retirement in 2014 as the CEO. And he was also a member of our board of governors for 10 years after that. So he will be recognized at the Health Sciences ceremony on Friday. The Chambers ceremony is on Saturday. And finally, Beth Walker is a longtime advocate of public engagement and civics education. She served as a justice of the Supreme Court of Appeals and also 2 terms of Chief Justice. Has been 25 years on the bench, and she'll be recognized at the College of Law ceremony on Friday. This is approaching my very first academic year, and in July I'll be 1 year in this position. I want to tell you how honored I am to be the president here, how much I love it in West Virginia. I've seen the entire state, 6,200 miles in rental cars since July of last year, and really looking forward to a productive summer as we gear up for the fall. Love this time of year, and I certainly want to thank you all for what you've done to contribute in your respective areas, and for the warm welcome that you've extended to my family and to me. So thank you so much. Scott, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have. So open it up to the floor.
Questions for President Benson? Catherine.
Hi, Dr. Benson. This is
Hi.
Catherine from WVU Libraries. I had a question from a constituent, and I'll give a little bit of background for those folks not aware of the situation. Speaking specifically about the investigative report on OSU's President Carter's resignation, which revealed an inappropriate relationship and misuse of university resources to benefit that relationship. What's of concern to WVU is the findings that Chris Koberek, our newly hired CFO, failed to appropriately raise ethical concerns and was the point person sort of tapped to facilitate that abuse of university resources. And, Koberek's involvement in that report was covered by the Dominion Post, shout out journalism, and obtained an official statement by WVU's Stratcom. And my impression of that statement was that it indicates our own administration's position that we're sort of full steam ahead with this hire, and that's all in spite of knowledge of those ethical breaches. So that brings me to my constituents' question. They wish to ask how administration plans to build trust in the CFO and administrators involved in that hiring in light of the report, suggesting Koberek's made poor choices in the past and considering erosion of faculty and student trust in previous administrations' handling around the budget crisis that resulted in academic transformation and faculty rifts. From the constituent, I would really value the ability to trust this new administration. And this report seems like a concerning dent in trust right at the start of that CFO relationship and co-signed by our new administration. So again, that sort of question is, how does our administration plan to build trust in the CFO? And how do we trust the decision-making of current administration involved in this questionable and concerning hiring decision? Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to respond. First, it's Koberek is his last name. And Chris, I did a lot of background checks on him. We had several people on the search committee that did the same. 27 years at the University of Nebraska, starting as a budget analyst and rose all the way to become the interim president for a while, and then was recruited to go to Ohio State. I will tell you, in all the conversations I had with Chris, the people that I spoke to about him, to a person, they were incredibly complimentary of his performances or his performance at both institutions. I was comfortable with the very difficult questions, pointed questions that I asked him, that other people on the committee asked him. He came and presented to our board. I would ask that people give him a chance. And once you meet him, just like you've had a chance to meet Beverly Wendland, these are 2 really important hires. Beverly comes to us, I think, with all the best bona fides imaginable. And Chris has now been associated with 2 very sophisticated Big Ten institutions, has a tremendous amount of acumen and experience in dealing with big budgets and academic health centers and very complicated kind of financial matters. So I have full confidence in Chris, and I know once people get to know him and hear him, and I would advocate too, Scott, if it's agreeable, we can have him come and present to the Faculty Senate. If not in June, then the one that the kick off the academic year. But he's got a great reputation, and again, to a person, they all spoke to that reputation and what he brings to West Virginia University. So we've got nothing but full confidence, faith, and confidence in Chris, and I know people will see that as they have a chance to interact with him.
Any other questions for the president? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We'll see you all at graduation.
Next up, as Corey emailed, interim Provost Kreider is under the weather and so cannot be here today. So we are down to the report from Vice President Furby on the student life update.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to address changes within Division of Student Life. I know there's a specific interest in the new Center for Community Connections and Culture. And while I plan to definitely address that, I also want to outline some of the broader organizational changes occurring within the division, and then be happy to address the vision for the new center as well. To begin, I think it's important to kind of level set in terms of the focus that I bring to student life, the focus of our Dean of Students, Carrie Showalter, who I know many of you know. Our primary focus is to ensure that the division is intentionally structured to best serve the students by, among other things, elevating their experience. To that end, since last August, we've undertaken a comprehensive evaluation of our people, our programs, and our resources to ensure that they are aligned with the evolving needs of our students. And importantly, with the broader priorities of the strategic compass. And so importantly, I want to be clear about the progress we've made. These changes are happening in real time. They're happening today. They're going to continue to happen over the next several weeks and several months. And so as we announced in March, the decision to appoint a number of leaders among our division, with that, we indicated the areas of which they would be responsible, that they would oversee. And in part, the changes that they would help us to implement. The implementation of the new structure is well underway, and it will continue. And as I've evidenced already by feedback that we received, you'll note that the new center that has gotten a lot of attention has already had an updated name, Center for Community Connections and Culture, and that better reflects the ultimate mission of that center. The timeline to choose our leaders was really what was required based on the review that we undertook through the fall semester. And at this point, those leaders have been in office in their roles for a few weeks. And so a lot of work is still required of them and of myself. So you may say, why are things changing? And it's simple. The reorganization is part of really an ongoing, ever continuing effort to make sure that we are aligned with what our students need. We need to improve our collaboration, and we need to ensure that long-term we have a sustainable operation. So the decisions to make changes were made certainly by myself and Dean Showalter with appropriate consultation within the university's leadership and other campus partners. But at its core, a couple goals. We wanted to reduce silos. We wanted to bring more coordination and collaboration among the units within student life. And we also, importantly, want to create an all-inclusive student-centered model. Then we need to adapt to all the changes that we're all seeing in real time from external factors and with the demographics of our student body. This is consistent with what you see at other institutions. A more deliberate effort to bring a consolidated model to achieve greater collaboration, broader student reach, and more efficient use of the resources we have. So let me talk about some of the organizational changes and units and clusters that we've created within Division of Student Life. Importantly now, our Dean's Office will have a designated student support hub. We intend to establish a one-stop shop essentially for all students in need of support, whether it's suddenly unhoused, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's a personal crisis, whatever the case may be. If a student needs assistance, And it is, then they should find their way to E. Moore Hall, and we will designate a team member to work with them. Many of you probably worked with our care team. This is essentially an extension of the care team to make certain that our resources that we have to bear are available and make it to the students who need it. With respect to, we have emergency funds, and there was a question asked, the student who needs something. And so we have at our disposal through the foundation and other resources, emergency funds, but we can't help those students that haven't made their way to us. And so we're aiming to have a one-stop. If a student reaches out because they are looking to find the rack for food insecurity, then we're going to follow up and make certain that they don't have other needs perhaps are unknown to us. Likewise, if a student is having a personal crisis, we're going to make sure we ask the follow-up question. Say, is there anything else we can do for you? Our primary goal is to make certain that the students that are recruited to come to WVU, they stay here, they make it through here because they have the tools that they need. Another important change that we've done is we've now combined and linked up the Caruth Center with Well WVU and Collegiate Recovery under a new unit called Student Wellbeing. Previously, the Caruth Center was sort of out on its own, responsible for its own outreach, responsible for its own marketing. But at the same time, we had a Well WVU team who is well-oiled machine in terms of outreach and student education of healthy choices and the like. So now those two teams will be under one umbrella, and we can work more cohesively to make certain that that information makes it to the students that need it. Likewise, we've moved student media, and it now reports through Nathan Harlan under a unit we've deemed to be experiential programming and services. So student media, student campus recreation, and Adventure West Virginia are all under the same leadership umbrella, which admittedly is an odd, you look at it and you say, explain this. What we have within those units are a lot of student employees and student volunteers who deliver services to this campus, but also to the broader community. Whether it be through rec, adventure, they all have a public component that the community takes part in. And certainly student media doesn't just inform our own campus, they inform the state. They have a wide distribution now through the Charleston Gazette, which is a great opportunity for those students to get their message out. And in doing so, they're impacting the community. And what we've recognized is they're learning skills on the job that they may very well do in their own professional career. So as the institution looks more to experiential learning, we want this group to really be a model for what that looks like on campus. To recognize that you don't necessarily always have to go off campus to get great experience. We have it right here in student life. Finally, just to round out the few other changes before I jump into the new center is we're student union and operations. Obviously, the Mountain Lair is centerpiece and will continue to be our primary student union. But we're looking to designate spaces within the Crossing building that will fall under the same managerial team so that as student groups and faculty groups like yourself want to have meetings and places to go and do things on campus, we now offer up multiple choices. And then finally, I've designated Sabrina Cave as our senior liaison for campus and community relations, recognizing that Sabrina has great institutional knowledge and is there to help us bridge the gap between the campus community, the broader community, and among our colleges and colleagues so that we can work better together going forward. The last cluster of units is our student engagement and leadership. This will be led by Assistant Dean Tane Lee and is the primary programming cluster within student life at this point. It's going to be comprised of our Greek Life Office, Student Involvement Leadership Center, plus the team of professional planners and programmers formerly associated with arts and entertainment. And as that, certainly a cohort of theirs will be the new Center for Community Connections and Culture, which brings together the LGBTQ+ Center and the Center for Black Culture. What we recognize is that collectively, this team of student life professionals, along with countless student employees and other volunteers, will be responsible for, among other things, advising the SGA, supporting 400+ student organizations, plus planning and executing a host of other programs and events meant to bring students together, and of course, executing signature events like Mountaineer Week, Homecoming, and Up All Night. Turning specifically to the new center, I want to affirmatively state that all the FTE previously associated with individual legacy centers have been retained and will continue. Additionally, we are in the process of pulling together the specific programming plan for the new center. which will essentially be the programming plans of the old centers combined and then some. So the new center is not a veiled effort to reduce programs or services, and the old centers are not closing. They're evolving into a new unit with greater staff and combined resources. Under this new model, we'll no longer operate the individual centers on what I would have deemed to be budgetary or operational islands. They're going to work together. We're going to have, they'll be part of the broader student engagement and leadership unit, which will provide them with significantly more resources and personnel support. And furthermore, in time, we intend for greater dedicated space for the center within the mountain layer. We aim to do more, not less. In closing, while the architecture of our division is changing, our mission remains constant. We're taking steps to refine our approach, ensure that every student has a community and every student can thrive. I want to acknowledge a number of individual faculty here and others who've reached out and who've shared concerns and perspectives on many of these changes, and acknowledge that direct communication and feedback is invaluable. We recognize that we're not infallible. We can get things wrong, we can make a mistake, but we're going to certainly move forward with trying to do things right and assess whether the impact is what we expected. And so as we roll into the next academic year, Student Life is taking on a new culture of assessment. We're going to have a new, much like the institution last year, we had a new strategic compass. We're doing some master planning of our own within the division. We're going to put our students first. We're going to be there for our students and make sure that they have what they need for long-term success. So I know I'm going to yield for questions. I do want to acknowledge, I see Ellen is here. I want to acknowledge Ellen Rodriguez. Her years of service dedicated to the LGBTQ+ Center is commendable, and we appreciate the time and the effort that she put into that center. And as we move forward and look for a new assistant director of the combined center, we're aiming to basically find somebody that meets the caliber and standard that Ellen has set for us. So I appreciate your service, Ellen. I wish you the best of luck in the faculty ranks. But it's important that we recognize the intent here is to do more and to make certain that all of our students have access to the resources and the communities that they look for. Thank you.
Kelly.
Hi, Kelly Watson, Eberly College. I have some notes. I'll try to say these in the most logical way. I'm gonna try not to ask like 4 questions at once. I'll try. So I guess a couple of questions that I had. You said that this is sort of about creating inclusivity, right? It seems to me a little bit that creating inclusivity in this case is flattening difference, right? And that these are specialists who work specifically with like LGBTQ populations or Black populations. And so how do we know that the individuals that are working with these populations have the appropriate training? And I understand you're hiring an assistant director. But also to say that we want this assistant director to do what Ellen was doing when Ellen was a director and paid more also seems odd to me. But I guess really what I'm asking is about the specialist training, right, that individuals who worked in the Center for Black Culture and the LGBTQ+ Center had, and whether or not we're expecting that of all of the other employees kind of in Student Life, because we had students here testifying kind of last time about the way that the LGBTQ+ Center is what attracted them and kept them here. And so I fear that not having people who are trained to deal with the specific issues of these populations are not going to create an environment that is more inclusive, but simply an environment that is more flattened, right, in terms of difference. And I was a little confused when you said that all the FTEs have been retained, when again, there was a program officer at the LGBTQ+ Center who was not renewed, and then Ellen's position was 12-month and right, things were changed. Anyway, I guess just kind of explain to me what you mean by inclusivity here, and explain kind of how people will be trained in handling these specific populations and the specific needs.
Yeah, so a couple, is it Kelly?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Without getting in specific personnel matters, I can tell you that the FTE are the same. There's not been a reduction in FTE. Reports of that to the contrary are not accurate. I'll start there. As to how, so I guess I would say that within Student Life, within the broader team, I think we all need to know how to talk to students, period. And so I appreciate that there is special training, and we will endeavor to get the staff on the team that have that and then some. And I know that also among you, we have the faculty fellows associated with the LGBTQ+ Center who have conducted these trainings in the past and helped with that programming. I don't anticipate that going anywhere. And so I think we should all continue to endeavor that we all understand how to speak to individual students, how to help them through the things that they are navigating. And yeah, I think the standard is set high for who we move forward with selecting when that time comes.
Okay, I'll leave now as soon as I ask. The Women's Resource Center, is that under this purview and where is that going?
So good question. So the Women's Resource Center did move to Student Life last August, and we are in the process of working with essentially the new Student Family Resource Center will encompass much of what the Women's Resource Center has previously done. Obviously, the focus being on students. We recognize that the overlap between students who have families and the advocacy of the Women's Resource Center often are one and the same. And so we're looking to essentially bring that together under a symbol within that resource hub that I referenced.
Joe Jones.
Thank you. Joe Jones, College of Creative Arts and Media. I apologize about my voice. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate you coming to speak with all of us. You did say these changes were coming to align with student needs, and you talked with leadership. I wonder if there was a movement to actually talk with students. Did that actually happen?
Yes, actually, it's still happening. So we have engaged in a number of discussions with students, individuals, and student organizations, and that won't stop. I mean, we're looking to establish ongoing, regular discussion to assess whether we're meeting their needs. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of things, but a student advisory committee to this center has been discussed. And if we think that's something that's feasible and sustainable, I think we're looking to do that. I should also add that within the broader student engagement and leadership, we're looking to stand up and initiate a student program board in general. So the student voice is very important to everything that we do in student life. And so we absolutely look to engage in those ongoing discussions with them about what's working and what's not.
And then is there any logic for bringing these two groups together specifically, the LGBTQ groups and the Center for Black Culture? Historically, those are not groups that necessarily align in a lot of ways. So what was the logic behind kind of combining them?
Yeah, so I know I've heard that, and we've kind of talked through. I think at the end of the day, taking in isolation each center. If you think about what it is they're trying to do, each one is trying to make certain that there is a location, a place where folks are familiar with that population, and obviously there's programming. The programming is open to all students, and it will continue to be so. And so when you sit there and you say, what do these two units have alike? There's a lot the individual units have alike. And so we're just looking at trying to multiply the output of saying, if you have, if under one center you had two folks thinking about this programming day in and day out, and in the other center you had three folks, now we have five. And they're not just thinking about these particular populations. We're actually looking to expand and think about how can we celebrate other cultures? How can we bring together and advocate for other underrepresented populations on this campus? Because there are others. And so to choose how we bring this together, to sit there and think about how we bring this together, I think it's a very simple analysis of these two things are alike, and let's see if we can pull the resources to do more than what we've been doing.
Okay, and just to echo, I think what my colleague was saying, when you use the language of reducing silos and this idea of we're all doing the same thing, I hope you're aware that marginalized populations still do have special needs and that you're not destroying sanctuaries as you're reducing silos. We need these separate spaces in order to feel safe. And I do think that needs to be kept in mind as opposed to kind of this idea of reducing silos. Think about sanctuaries as well and what people actually need. So
Yeah,
that's
that's a good question. The space question is sort of unique, right? Because the programming, like I said, you can say, well, this program is like that program. We're celebrating different folks. Very, very aware of the space issues. And so one of the things that we are, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of things, but the career services folks in the student union will be moving to the Crossing at some point in the fall. That will give up a host of space in the student, what I'll call student government wing of the Mountain Lair. And as that happens, we are right now thinking about how that space can be better utilized, how we can have spaces in there that are, spaces associated with the center and with other just general space for students. And so again, across campus, space is a unique discussion. And I would also, and it's just sort of my knee-jerk reaction, when we talk about safety and safe on campus, I hopefully, honestly, every student should feel safe on campus, right? And everybody, and I know, understand what we mean by that, but I think it's also important that we need to appreciate and stand out and say, this is a safe campus. I mean, we have issues. There are communities who may not get along. We have disputes and disagreements, and we have crime from time to time, and it all gets reported. But from UPD to our compliance office to folks like myself and you, individuals like you, we're all very aware of what's happening on campus. And if we see something that is not right, if there's a student who literally is not safe, we need to take action. And it's, a space for them will help, but making certain that that gets reported and that we follow up on it is also just as important.
Thank you.
Brian Pell, Statler College.
Hi, I'm glad to hear that you're making the effort now to go through and meet with students, but can you talk about what outreach you did with students prior to announcing these changes? You discussed that you had talked with university leadership and campus partners, but none of the students involved in student organizations that I'm involved with from like the LGBTQ center side of things, this was basically dropped on them with the public announcement. Was there any effort to reach out to students prior to actually implementing this change?
So a little bit of a trick question because we're implementing the change now. And so the only thing that
prior to announcing the
Yep.
change,
the only thing that we had was an idea. And so no, admittedly.
you've already changed the reporting structure. When I go through and look at who Ellen Rodriguez was reporting to, it's in the new reporting structure.
Correct. But the center is not changed. There wasn't a change with the LGBTQ plus center or with the CBC prior to the announcement. The announcement went public. As I indicated, the announcement, the intent there was to say, these are our new leaders. These are the areas that they're going to oversee and essentially the changes that are going to be implemented. So you're right. Could I have gone and talked to more individual students and vetted the concepts? Perhaps. I'm not sure that that would have changed the outcome because until we get down and start talking about the nitty gritty of where the office is going to be and how the program is going to get funded, all of that had to happen before you can go out and start talking about the actual programs themselves. So, again, I can admit, could we have said more upfront behind the scenes? I suppose. We also didn't have to put it in the release at all. I mean, that's the other thing that I think is important to say. We could have just announced our new deans and went about planning this and working through the summer and rolling this out in August, but we didn't do that.
You didn't announce that you were merging the centers in your press release. You said you were creating a new center. You did not include any information in that press release about merging the Center for Black Culture and the LGBTQ Center in.
I'm sorry, I missed, say the question there.
In your press release, you did not include any information that you were abolishing the existing centers. You said you were creating a new center. You did not say that you were eliminating the existing centers. So if you're trying to suggest that you've been transparent with that, I don't believe so.
Well, on that note, what I would say is this. This has been an ongoing, evolving decision. And so what was announced was accurate, and what is happening today is still an ongoing implementation of the decisions. So as I stand here today, I'm not so certain that the LGBTQ plus center will not have some identity going forward. And I don't know, I can't say the same for the CBC either. But as we work through the coming weeks and months as to what the new center looks like and the programming that it undertakes and how those centers, the legacy centers, are either acknowledged or continued under the umbrella of a single center, then I'll tell you for certain what the outcome is. But I think we're all kind of assuming a lot. And it may be that the ultimate outcome here is that there is no legacy center tied to either population, and we have a single center. But I'd like to think that there's a way that we keep the sentiment and certainly the identity of those going forward to acknowledge that we've had a Center for Black Culture for more than 30 years. We've had a Center for LGBTQ plus for going on 10 years. So so the semantics of what they're called and those different, admittedly, this is an ongoing real-time discussion. The leadership team in place is sitting down now to talk through and to consider what this might look like. So again, it's a rolling implementation, but again, we could have gone and tried to put this as a more polished program and then rolled it out all at once, in which case I don't think folks would have liked that either. So,
Well, having some buy-in from the constituents you're supposed to be serving is generally helpful for things. So, and I would also point out the fact that you've actually had to go and rename the unit already before it's apparently been fully implemented also kind of suggests the lack of planning here, but that's all I have to say for right now.
Ron Reeser, Statler College.
I do have a question that we had talked about previously that I'll follow up on here in a minute. I am very disappointed to hear that there was a lack of consultation of students as well as other, if you want to use the word stakeholders involved in this. When your stakeholders for this new unit are marginalized communities, I feel like making a decision without consulting them is really inappropriate and reductive and dismissive. I also do think that the semantics do incredibly matter. There are plenty of students who feel more safety and support because of the presence of a unit that has them in the name, because visibility and representation is important. On the topic of visibility and representation, so I am a gay faculty member. I don't have a lot of opportunities in my particular area to often provide that visibility, but one of the ways that I can do so is the current LGBTQ+ Center's Faculty Fellows Program, as well as the availability of trainings such as the former Safe Zone, current SOGI, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Expression training. Those are programs that benefit faculty, they benefit other employees, staff, community members as well. I understand the importance of these resources for students, but can you talk about what the continuing program will look like for faculty members and how I, with this new center, will be able to retain some of that visibility and the ability to act as an ambassador, a point of contact that students can recognize. I can put that on my email signature and my syllabus that says currently I'm a faculty fellow affiliate with the center. In what fashion will I be able to continue that under the new center? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ron. So at this point, that program is intended to be continued, involvement with the faculty through that program. If someone has not reached out to you yet, that should be forthcoming. As for the broader implications of what does this mean for faculty versus students? So obviously, this is a student life program. It's a student life center. And so the focus for that will continue to be, the primary goal will be students, but recognizing the benefit that the center offers to other individuals. I mean, again, we're not looking to diminish that. The name could change. The LGBTQ+ Center, name could fade at some point, but the intention behind the center and the outreach and the education that you just outlined, I mean, the intent is to keep that. Could it look different? It could. I mean, we could continue to negotiate what that might look like at some point and reassess things and say what is working and what's not. But the intent right now is not, we're not cutting that. So hopefully it continues and you can stay involved.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would just like to point out that with such small communities involved, the LGBTQ community is the one that I can speak for. It is important to, even if it's underneath of the umbrella of student life, remember that the rest of us are out there as well in different roles. And we have to have that representation as well in order to feel supported, safe, respected. So I encourage you to please keep in mind the faculty, staff, employee perspective, as well as the community, because of the size of the LGBTQ community in Morgantown. It is even important for people who are not affiliated with the school to benefit from certain programs like Morgantown Pride, the graduation, Lavender graduation events, all those sorts of outreach is important. And I think if we're trying to go with the president's mission to get into the, what is it, AAU, is that what it's called? Need to look at what peer institutions are doing and make sure that we're doing something comparable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Daniel Brewster, Everly.
Just a couple quick questions. The first kind of addresses like the elephant in the room of like, when we're talking about identities, like it's, very significant. Like I'm a undergrad, grad, faculty member here. And, when I was here 20 years ago, no one self-identified as a gay professor or a lesbian professor. I had mentors who I, now as adult, now as a member of the faculty, do know that, they were lesbian and they were gay, but they never were able to champion in that way. And so some things have changed, I think, in a lot of ways, but I think just in general, one of your statements during the presentation, and I appreciate, we met, and I appreciated that hour that we spent together, but during the presentation, you said that many other institutions are moving in similar directions to this, and kind of like what someone else said. I did a background of all the AA universities for 2025, and less than 10 did not have an LGBTQ plus center. So which institutions, were we talking about that have moved away from LGBTQ plus centers?
Yeah, sorry. When speaking that way, I'm not necessarily addressing this specific action we're taking with the centers. I'm talking more generally about the programs across student life and reassessing the delivery of those programs. That said, I think it's fair to say, there are institutions out there who have, for reasons that are out of their control, have had to eliminate these centers. We're fortunate that has not come to pass here. And so by combining the resources, by implementing the changes that we're trying to fortify the efforts that we have here, the legacy of these centers to continue going forward. And by broadening the scope to incorporate and to address and try to celebrate other cultures and other underrepresented communities on campus, we're trying to deliver on the intent to help all students.
In that's actually one of the things that I would say that is something that both the Center for Black Culture and Research and the LGBTQ plus Center do, is they are this inclusive space that welcomes other groups who don't necessarily have those spaces on campus. The second question, is a little bit more intentional, and it may not be one So there was a foundation fund that was tied to the LGBTQ plus Center, and in particular the work of people advocating and championing for LGBTQ plus students, the Bill Peters Fund. Do you have any idea where that fund is going to be housed and who's going to be responsible for the workings of that account moving forward?
Yeah. So as I said here right now, I'm not familiar with that specific fund, but I do know that both centers have designated funds throughout within the foundation. The intention is that the programming that would have otherwise been tied to that fund will continue to be funded through that. We're not looking to cross-pollinate, if you will, funds that are designated for different things. So again, not familiar with that specific one, but the intent would be that those funds, those that have been given in a particular manner to support certain programs, will continue to be utilized for that purpose.
And just one last comment, moving forward, I really would, I advised SGA for years. I was a member of SGA. I think that SGA does a great job advocating for students, but in many ways, SGA does function as an arm of the institution. Their budget is tied to, their work, and, it's allocated through the institution. So SGA isn't always the best person to be, kind of representing these kinds of needs of students. And so I would just encourage you to kind of reach out And also, like, these students aren't necessarily students who are going to be in student orgs, right? Because the center does create that inclusive space for them. So you're not going to necessarily find them in, I advise 3 student orgs. You're not going to find them in my student orgs. And so, just moving forward, like, I would really encourage you, across the board to, maybe make a call that's much more like to the entire student body to, get feedback and, you just recognize that student orgs aren't always going to be those kind of inclusive spaces, but thank you.
Thank you.
A question from Catherine Fonseca.
Hi there. So I'll just echo what has already been said, that, the erasure of name diversity or minorities in the center's title is shameful. And I think the Center for Community Connections is frankly a really milquetoast, vague title. But we heard from students who identify as belonging to the queer community in our last faculty meeting that the presence of an LGBTQ center was a key decision in coming to WVU and something they explicitly searched for, I imagine, online. And I imagine the same sort of named visibility is also important for recruiting Black students. So for students doing some preliminary searching online when vetting colleges, will the web page at least still explicitly name that it serves ethnic and gender and sexual minorities among the other expanded identities meant to be served under this broader umbrella center?
Yeah, good. Catherine, appreciate that. Good question. The short answer is yes. The intention is to be very clear what this center does and what it doesn't do. And so I heard those comments when they were made, and recognize that the accessibility of this center and other resources is key when a student chooses where to go. And so our effort is to make certain that the students who are looking to come to WVU understand that we do help to build these communities, help to support communities, and that if they are looking for a particular program or a particular location or space, that they should be able to find that. So the answer is it absolutely, our website should be up to date so that it reflects this going forward in the final iteration of the center.
Thank you.
Lisa Costello, SLM.
Hi, Lisa Costello, School of Medicine. Thank you so much, Vice President Furby, for being here. As a 3-time graduate of West Virginia University, student life is what led me to be here. As a student government alum, a former Miss Mountaineer, now Mountaineer distinction, this division has laid the foundation of any other engagement that I've had as hailing as a Mountaineer. So the role of this unit is far beyond what is, I think, even can be said. It's invaluable. Now that I live mostly in health sciences, I didn't hear you speak much of that. And 20 years ago, I didn't feel that there was much of that representation. So there's a physical space. There's also just a presence to be there. So could you speak a little bit about your vision in this restructuring to have representation across the board? You've named some physical locations. However, there are more locations than what you've at least shared, and trying to get a little bit more confidence in that we're going with these restructuring make a difference and not move backwards, as I feel and sensing this sentiment that there's a lot of concern that might be the case.
So I appreciate that. And so just so I don't take your question and roll in a different direction, you're talking specifically to the outreach of maybe the center that we're talking about, or the broader?
I think just the broader student life, the restructuring that you spoke to. I think last week there were students, particularly from health sciences, or last meeting, that spoke to that. So I think there is a little bit of overlap with both.
Certainly. Well, let me just begin by saying, like you, I echo the personal reflection of what student life has done in different times for myself. I count my blessings every day to be in this role. I take it seriously. And, it's interesting you bring up the health sciences, because I think for a long time, we probably haven't done much from a student life perspective at the health sciences area or in the health sciences spaces. I think there was a time when student life really probably was defined as undergraduate student life. And over time, we've tried to expand that to be not just the undergraduates. It's obviously, because there was a time when graduate students didn't pay the fees that got you access to the student life benefits. And so that no longer is the case. So I think the long and short of it is this. We recognize that our students are in lots of places. Health sciences, also looking to our divisional campuses. So I can't say here and say I have a specific plan or program that's going to make outreach to those student life students. What I can say is with respect to those organizations, because I know there was a couple who, and I'm going to get their names wrong, but I know there was a representative who spoke at the last, the intent was somebody on our team was going to reach out directly to talk with them, and to make certain that they understand that we are still here to support them. And that should be the case for all students. As we look to the various breakdown, we have a lot of issues with respect to the resources, whether they're on one campus or the other. I have students who have approached us who say, well, they would love to have a career center on the downtown. And I know that probably the health sciences students would love to have a career center out there. Some things we just can't do with the resources we have, but I think the intention is there. And so as we move this forward, we talk about programming spaces. I think we've got to do a better job of acknowledging there are spaces that we could be programming at the health sciences. In fact, I was just on a call earlier this week talking about Welcome Week, and it was very quick. Somebody pointed out, hey, let's not forget there's going to be Ask Us Anything tables at health sciences, right? Because if you're not in the space, often we drive past it and we think, oh, it's the hospital. And it is so much more. And we've got a lot of students up there. So I will take this to heart that we need to make a better outreach to all the students for all the things that we're offering, and emphasize that it's not just those undergraduate students we're trying to reach, and that we're trying to provide the resources for all those students.
Thanks. And just as a follow-up, what type of monitoring will be in place to have that? You speak about serving more.
Yeah.
What are we going to be doing, and how as Faculty Senate could we be getting those reports to see, are we serving more, and what your vision is and what type of monitoring would be? Because the story I shared earlier, the student actually didn't want to reach out because they were embarrassed. They didn't want to seek the resources. And I worry as we grow larger, that's going to further stigmatize seeking these resources that I think we all want students to be able to have access to.
That specific example I think is tough, because we recognize that there's a stigma associated with asking for help, and sometimes taking help. Myself, well, I won't get into that, but we've got to try to break that down and to make certain that what a student, taking on an individual student by student case, if a student needs a resource and we have it in our ability to give it to them, then we should be connecting them with somebody in the dean's office. And that's a confidential endeavor. I mean, we don't advertise who or how many. As for the bigger question of how are we measuring the impact, acknowledging this. So Student Life has had an inconsistent record, I think, over the years of doing assessment and understanding what our impact truly is. And so as we've entered into this, talking about change and rolling out organizational structure, we are also bringing into a new culture of what does assessment look like and how do we do it consistently. I'll give a shout out to Donna in the back there. And so we are working to incorporate assessment going forward into the next academic year so that we are starting to measure the things that matter. And, I'll admit, we're also taking it baby steps, because we're not going to go and try to roll out a, 16-prong assessment in year one. The plan is that over the next year or two, we ramp that up and it's a little more comprehensive. And at that point, I think we should have some meaningful data. What I can say is that individually, we had a lot of units who are doing great work, great assessment, tracking impact. To the extent that that's been ongoing, we'll continue that. So, as we look ahead, if there is information, Scott and to the faculty, if there's a question, if there's something we can provide you, we will work to do that. And if we don't have it, we'll start to figure out how we can try to manage that and to best deliver a response.
And Mandy.
Hi, yeah, Mandy Wyrick with Eberly. So I appreciate you being here. I know it's probably very challenging to discuss this without really speaking to the truth of it in a public setting. I know there's political pressure and so forth. So we appreciate you being here. We have 1% of our population in West Virginia is Black. A good majority of Black students live in the Morgantown area. I just read a whole bunch of papers by students that broke down the population segments in the state. And it is vitally important that we have a place that specializes in issues focused on Black students. They have a unique history, a comprehensive history that I would say a lot of white people don't know and don't understand deeply. Black people in this country just lost a significant amount of representation in our government. So this history is affecting them very particularly right now. And to kind of minimize the idea that we're smushing all of these population expertise centers into one place to do more is really not honest, because you won't be able to, because you won't be able to specialize. You won't be able to have the folks that really have that deep understanding, being able to focus on those very specific topics with specific people that go to school here. And that's just the truth. Maybe you're just trying to work with what you've got, but the truth is we won't be able to focus on the issues that affect these populations greatly. And the same can be said for the LGBTQ students. It just won't happen the way it has happened. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you said you wanted to do more. So what, if we're offering the baseline that we've already offered the LGBTQ students and the Black students here at this university, and then we're going to do more for them, can you tell us exactly how we're going to do more for them than we're already doing?
Yeah, so appreciate the comments, and you're right. I'm not gonna. There's a host of commentary in there, and you know, you're right. Recent headlines, recent court decisions, a host of impacts that are impacting these students and our populations. So with respect to what do we mean by more, the specific thing is, I don't know the intent. And when I say we're going to do more, what I hope to mean by that is we're going to do more for more students. And so, but the center, you're correct. You've got to have specialized individuals who can come in and talk to these students about their lived experiences and how that translates to them, right? I mean, every student is an individual, but we also can draw conclusions from background and different things. You know, I would point to our, you know, we have a really active and robust Black alumni program. And I would expect, I know that they are really good advocates for our current students, you know, that enjoy the benefits of the Center for Black Culture, and you know, they're able to build mentors and so forth. That's going to continue. And so that alumni base is going to continue to be there to provide some of what you're referring to there. And I would say, you know, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but we have a lot of, you know, other individuals who are associated with the LGBTQ+ Center here on campus. Some of them, you know, faculty and the like, who've identified themselves to me. And I would say that the opportunity to continue to be a benefit and a mentor to this community is still there. It's still in existence. When I talk about more, I'm talking about the fact that in just a short time, the calendar for the CBC for the upcoming academic year and the calendar for the LGBTQ+ Center, kind of aligning those up and saying, okay, here are the events that we've got planned. Where are we not doing an event or thinking about doing a specific program that could celebrate a student or a different population on campus? That effort was already underway to think through as we look at our calendar of programs and events that we do across campus. You know, the Lavender graduation was just referenced, right? And it's already scheduled for the next year. You know, what more type of celebration can we have around graduation for other underrepresented populations? And a lot is made of in reference to the staff of the centers. And I want to point out that the center is part of a broader student engagement leadership team. And so as we look to fully collaborate within that unit, we have a lot more hands to support and to program and to build these events out, so that what is a tried and true process that has been working for a number of years can continue and then also be expanded on.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Furby. I appreciate you coming today and taking our questions. Okay, for Senate business, the election update. So this will take a second. Okay, for the Senate Chair-elect for next year will be Catherine Fonseca from Libraries. The representative to the Board of Governors for Extension or Medicine will be, again, Leslie Cottrell for one more term. She has made it pretty clear she has limited, if any, interest at all in serving more than one more term. But she will be around for another 2 years. For the Exec Committee, the Exec Committee members for next year who are elected, again, that's 7 people and no more than 1 per constituency. Joe Jones from Creative Arts and Media, Casey Kidd from Medicine, Brian Powell from Statler, Ashley Sowards from Dentistry, Emily Tanner from Chambers, Carrie Gabbert from Extension, and Deanna Brewster from Epperly. And then in terms of the individual senators who are elected for next year, I'm not going to read like dozens of names at you. That's why the teller's report is there. You can find your constituency and see what their voting results were for your constituency. Are there any questions about the election processes for this year? Okay, is there any new business? Joe Jones from Creative Arts and Media.
I'm going to use my name my mom would want. So Dr. Joseph Jones, particularly from the Reed School of Media and Communications, and you'll see why here in a second. The Daily Athenaeum, or the DA, is the independent student newspaper of WVU. As such, it is a vital social institution of accountability for our university system, reporting on important events and keeping us all honest, helping us improve and be the best university we can for our students, our staff, and all the stakeholders of our great state of West Virginia. Just as importantly, the DA is a source of common culture. In our age of information silos and scattered social media feeds, the DA provides a public sphere to focus our conversations and engage with each other as citizens and neighbors. It is one of the last remaining media spaces where we can all come together and imagine ourselves as a united community. This fall, the university will no longer provide the DA with email addresses for incoming students. The DA has also been instructed to purge its email distribution lists of existing student emails. Instead of students automatically receiving the DA's weekly newsletter with the option of opting out, students will now, including first-year students and transfer students who might not know it exists, will need to opt into the DA. While I understand the reasoning of limiting emails students receive, this move will hurt our overall sense of community. Especially in our current context, we require more social connections and not less. I therefore call on university leadership, and President Benson, I know you weren't the one to make this decision, but I also believe President Benson knows the value of local journalism, to reinstate the pre-existing email arrangement with the DA, still allowing students to opt out, but actively investing in the Mountaineer family and encouraging the student-made bonds that unite us all. So that's what I have to say. In the fall, I would highly encourage you, if these changes aren't remade back, to have your students sign up to get the DA newsletter. I will remind you again in August. I'm serving again next year, so I'll be up here again once the meeting's over. We all want to go. I'll probably say it one more time. But please know that this is happening, and I call on leadership to rethink this decision and reach out to me personally if you'd like some conversations about that. So thank you.
Is there any other new business? Then we are adjourned. Please take a cookie or two. Please vote tomorrow, and good luck surviving graduation.